It always makes me laugh. All right, I'm going to call the Community Health and Safety Task Force meeting for October 4th, 2022 at 5:39. And this is an all Zoom meeting. Good to know there. The Roundhouse Room is on the agenda, which is Julie. I just noticed right now. All right, let's start off with the roll call.
All righty. Good evening, everyone. Great to see you all. Thank you for being here. So tonight we have Renee, Chris, Julie, Emily, Monica.
Actually, Valeria, we need people to actually stay present now.
Gotcha. Thank you for reminding me. So Councilwoman Renee Villarreal.
Present.
Councilor Chris Rivera.
Here.
Annie Raspin.
Here.
Emily Kettleback.
Here.
Sarah Grant.
She's
Hi.
actually a community member.
Oh, welcome. Welcome, Sarah.
Yeah.
Monica Alt.
Present.
And Marcela Diaz.
I'm here.
Welcome, everyone. Great. There we go. Roll call is complete.
So excused, we actually have Mary Louise Romero is excused. Gino Zamora will be late. Valeria is with us, and Sarah Grant is a community member joining us.
And do we have Bruce excused, or is he joining us later? I haven't heard.
I think he's excused at this point.
Alrighty. Beautiful. Thank you.
All right. We will move on. Let's see here. To the approval of the minutes from September 20th, 2022. Were there any changes from staff? I see no. Okay. Anyone else have changes to the minutes if you looked at them? All right, seeing none, can we can't get I was like, voice vote. Let's do another. I don't know, Julie, do you want to, how do you want to do this? I'm always confused. Should Valeria do our roll call?
You know, I'm totally cool with it.
Okay. For the minutes, approval of minutes, I need a motion in a second. Anyone?
Move for approval of the minutes from September 20th.
I second.
All right. Valeria can do a roll call.
Absolutely. Seconds. Roll call. We have Councilwoman Renee Villarreal.
Yeah, yes.
Councilor Chris Rivera.
Yes.
Annie Raspin.
I wasn't there, so I can't vote.
Right. Okay. Emily Kaltenbach.
Yes.
Monica Holt.
Yes.
Marcela Diaz.
I'm here. Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
And Annie, you can abstain if you want, since you weren't at
Okay.
the meeting.
I'll abstain. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on here. Communications from the co-chairs. I have nothing at this point. Do you have anything, Chris?
I don't.
Okay.
Okay. None at this time.
So communications from facilitator.
Gina
staff.
is joining the meeting now.
Excellent.
Gino's here. Hi, Gino. Welcome. Okay. So I've got Gino Zamora for roll call.
He's good. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Gino, are you here?
I
We don't hear
am.
you yet. Okay, great. All right, we're moving on. So I don't know if staff had any other announcements, updates.
So I have one really important announcement that I'll make. So I did hire my community violence program manager. They officially started today.
Yay.
And
Awesome.
so the position was filled by Dr. Sophie Andar. And so
Oh,
she will be taking on that role, which is really fantastic. And it took about 3 months to get her in, but we got her in. So I'm really excited for her to start some of the work around the community violence initiatives. So super excited to make that announcement. Finally.
excellent. Julie, what was the position? Community violence?
So it's a youth and family services program manager with an assignment in community and youth violence. And so we have one more position that we're filling, and it's a youth and family services program manager, but with assignment to homeless solutions. So that one is still vacant.
Okay, thank you. That's great news. Julie there's a lot of vacancies in Julie's, not really just department, but the whole, not division, but the whole department, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I will say that my division, as before Sophie came on board, I was at a 70% vacancy rate.
Oh, wow. Look at all the pets that we have too in the room.
That's awesome.
That's great, Julie. I'm glad that you're getting support.
Thank
It'll
you.
make everything a lot easier. Anything, Valeria, that you wanted to share with us?
Yes, absolutely. So as you know, we're approaching our quarterly progress report presentation to the governing body. You've received the report, the slide deck, and thank you all, the ones that provided some revisions. Really appreciate that. Renee and I are going to be meeting tomorrow morning to dial in the slide deck and make it as concise, shortened as possible. And then that will be submitted to Julie to submit to the Prime Gov so that we're ready to go next week. At some point, maybe before we break out, after the discussion and before we do the breakout, or Arlene and to Renee and Chris, what do you guys think about sort of getting a sense of who's going to participate for the presentation? So just kind of doing that sort of plug in there. And I have it on my notes here, kind of keeping the Ithaca Reimagining Community Safety presentation in our radar. And so, Chris, if you've heard anything from Ithaca, updates are welcome. Also, encouraging all of you to take a look at our work plan, our remaining calendar, quote unquote, annual calendar dates available for presentation. So we've got October 18th, November 1st, November 8th, and then we start getting into December 9th and December 14th as a possibility for our quarterly presentation to the governing body. So there's still some dates available for learning sessions, should you have priorities around that. Otherwise, just make note of that October 12th for the next governing body meeting.
Val, can you recite those available dates again? Sorry, I didn't get them all.
Yeah, no worries. I'm going to put it on the chat
Okay.
so that you can copy and paste very quickly. And Marcela, I see your hand, my dear. Go ahead. Ooh.
Hey, I haven't had a chance to go in and change this on the report, Valeria, but just to remind folks that we no longer have a separate community engagement working group. That morphed into the alternative approaches. So it's the alternative approaches and community engagement group, and we're taking on with our new addition to our alternative group, or the morphing of the two groups. So I just wanted to share that for the purposes of the report.
So it's alternative approaches and community engagement.
I mean, we never voted on a new name for our working group, but basically we're doing both.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
I think what we're gonna do, y'all, because we have a very limited time to present, we have a really busy agenda that night. We need to summarize things concisely and actually probably putting all the kind of accomplishments together in all the different task forces and not defining that was the, policies and practices working group, and that was this, defining that we're gonna put it all together, and I'm just making sure you're okay with that before we do it. I think it just would make it easier to read, just put them all together. And then some of those slide decks have a lot of information, and I don't know if you all looked at it. All that information is actually in the quarterly report update. That's the actual document. That's going to be an attachment to what do you call it? It'll be part of the packet material for the governing body. So they'll have that information and that's accessible to the public as well. But the slide deck really needs to just be short, like a few slides. And so if there's something that you saw in there, because there's a lot of information from all the presentations, if there's something that like learnings, a couple of bullet points, 3 bullet points from those presentations, I think that's how we should do it. So there's a lot in there in the slide deck. And I don't know if it's Valeria, if there's a way, because when you had told Marcela the way she could edit it would be to put the comments. I don't know. It seems
I
like
just
a
wanted
harder
to
way.
edit that one page, but I don't,
Okay.
but also, am I hearing correctly that there's the slide deck, but then there's also a longer report? So
Yeah.
the comment about, so I can go in and change the name of the group, because that's what I was going to change, and some updates on the community engagement process we're about to finally embark on. But I don't have to do that on the slide deck. I can also do that in this other report, but I don't know where to access the other report. Am I missing something? Where can I access the
Yeah.
big report?
Yeah, Marcela, I shared a Google Doc on Thursday or Friday so that you can directly revise where you need. I was just asking to use the suggested edit feature so that I can
Happy to
keep
do
track
that,
on.
yeah.
Okay.
But is that to the report or is that to the slide deck? That's what I'm
That's my
confused about.
master document,
Okay.
which then frames
Forms
the
the
actual
slide deck.
report and then
Perfect,
informs
I
the
got
slide
it.
deck.
Thank you. I'll go in
Thank
and change the name of the committee right now. If it's
Okay.
okay with the working group.
The other thing I would suggest for Valeria's support is that those of you that were in charge of putting together those presentations or those panelists is to look at the main document, because there's like a lot of information. It summarizes what the presentation was about and some of the findings that they shared with us. If there's something that you think needs to be in the slide deck that's of importance to highlight, if there's a way you can go into that Google Doc and just say add to slide deck or something, because right now we have almost everything that's in the document in the slide deck. Not everything, but a lot of it, and we need to like just make it short and sweet. So I know this is a lot, but if Emily and Monica, because you were in charge of those panels, and then so was, who else was part of that? I guess, I mean, I could do Nate Cole for that presentation, or me and Gino, or I don't know, one of us that really was like, because Annie wasn't there. I'm just trying to get the succinct pieces that we should put in the presentation.
Mhm.
And it would help if you all had input, because we could just guess and pick things, but I think it'd be helpful if you actually like look at it and go, that's actually important to just say, this was some of the findings from that presentation or why it was important, right?
Mhm.
I mean, we want to make it really short. So does that make sense, or does that just seem like not doable this week?
It makes sense. I would just say from having to produce this thing, it's doable if we can all get these revisions by the end of day tomorrow. I know we've been sort of inching every week towards this week, and it's tight, but I also need that turnaround time so I can make sure everything looks great and submit it to Julie on end of day Thursday, first thing in the morning Friday. So it's really up to all of you how, quickly you can turn it around.
Just to confirm, you've received the revisions from our working group, correct?
Yes, Gino, I got yours, I got Renee's, I got Emily's. Yes.
So, sorry, I'm also a little confused. So you've got our revision. So now, Comfort, you're asking for us to modify that down, distill it down for the presentation?
For the slide deck, because I created the slide deck from the report, right? And summarized it as much as possible. The thing that I always stumble upon is that I get afraid to leave something out that's important. And of course, all of you are the experts and closest to the work. And so it'd be great for you to look at the slide deck and said, just highlight this key finding. You don't have to get into all that other detail, like Renee is saying.
Okay, and sorry, just a technical question then, but as I recall, the slide deck was like we couldn't modify anything on it.
No, but what you can do is send me an email and say, slide 3, please, just include this sentence for key findings. Like you literally would have to just spell it out for me. Val, include these 3 points, take everything else out, or modify this point. So on.
Is it easier to go into the Google Doc that actually has all the information and then you all just highlight what you think should be in the slide deck?
Yes, highlight as a comment so that I know who's highlighting what for what slides.
Does that make
So you
sense,
can
y'all?
definitely, yeah, you can definitely highlight. Oof,
Because
excuse me.
just so you know, I've done that before where I look at the slide deck and I send Valeria my comments in an email and it's a lot of work. So I'd rather just look at the document and what you've already edited and say this should be in the slide deck. Is that easier? I'm just trying to find an easier way that you all can let us know what is actually pertinent, because right now the slide deck's almost 20 slides and we need to be about 5 or 6. Is that a hand up, Monica?
Yes.
And Annie, I thought was unmuted too.
I was just pondering, just so much of what Val put in there, I think is really useful and shows the scope of what we did. So I struggle with where to cut it down. I think talking about some of the presentations and the content of that could be cut down. But
Well, all of that will still be in the document that you're looking at.
Okay.
And that will actually be submitted to the governing body also.
Right.
The
Okay.
slide deck is like what we'll be going through at the presentation that needs to be short and sweet. And if they have questions from that other document, they can ask us. Hopefully we have a lot on that agenda. We just can't extend it. Although I'm sure there'll be questions about why we want to extend our time frame work to do.
Makes
but
sense,
we'll see.
100%.
Monica, did you have a question?
I did. So I'm just looking at this real quick. So you said that you want to distill the slides to 3 slides. So to me, then then you're cutting almost all of this out. You would have 1 slide that just lists the presentations. Then you would just say, this is who presented, this is where they're from, and this was the purpose, period. But that wouldn't be on the slide because there's no way to fit all of that, right? So, I mean, but cut out pretty much everything.
Well, I didn't say completely 4 slides. I'm just talking about each one should have, what is this in front of us?
I just decided to open the slide that Monica is referencing because it lists all the sessions. It just says, here's what we've achieved this last quarter. Then I give a quick update on the policies and practices.
Yeah, and all of that needs to be changed. This is
So
old
you
stuff that we have.
Yeah, you and I will work on these 6 and 7. We'll bring it down to 1 slide. I think what Renee's talking about is from slide A through 16, we've got it make it even more concise. And because of the timing, that it's limited on October 12th.
So it's
So-
not like we don't need to put in information about some of those key findings from those presentations. It's just that, like, there's just too much information. Like if you just saw those findings with
Yeah.
Sophie's presentation, with the police department's presentation about their staffing report. So
My thing is, why not just keep it as the slide 5? I mean, because then we're going to follow up with a full report that will have key findings and the recommendations. And we don't want to do recommendations until we actually do the community engagement, right? And then
Yeah.
we're nice and fast. I mean, even though it's great stuff, right? Like people don't, as far as a presentation, it seems better to just keep it this way. These were the learning sessions that people have potential questions about them. They can, pick them out. That's my opinion, is that it seems like, yeah, to shorten this, you could really, really shorten it. There's no need for sort of the extensive slide discussion on each thing. That's just my opinion.
that's helpful to, like, we'll just have to like break it up. And I mean, some of that stuff is valuable just to say, oh yeah, we actually did a lot of work. There was this great presentation. They can get all those details that Valeria was showing you in the other document.
So based on what just Monica provided as input, it would be literally these 4 slides. This one with overall updates, these other updates about next steps, what's coming in the 4th quarter, Q&A. And I'll just like omit the other ones. Just go ahead, Marcela, I see your hand, my dear.
And you're muted.
Marcela.
She's still muted.
No
Marcela,
te
you're still
escuchamos,
muted.
querida.
Sorry, I was just gonna repeat what Monica said. Yes, my reluctance on this was, why are we saying what potential recommendations are yet if we're not there yet? But I love that you included, and as a part of the broader report, some of the key findings from the presentations. Thank you, Valeria, for keeping track of those and for putting them someplace, because we will absolutely need them for the report, which is daunting. The only thing I would add, and I'm going to add information very, very briefly on the next steps about the timeline on the implementation of the survey, so that they know that this is happening and what we can expect, what the city can expect from that. So I'll do that today or tomorrow. The only other thing that you might want to add is where people can see recordings of the presentation. That's the only thing I would add. So they can go and look at it themselves.
I love that idea. And I think it's not just the first 4 slides, but then keeping the what's next and then leaving it. And then people can go and access the recordings and they can enrich their learning. Because I know for some of our presentations, we had a series of additional documents that came with it. I know I sent something around for Vera, and I have the slide deck, so I'm going to do that tonight and send that to everybody. But there's, all of those other resources can be made available somewhere, but they don't have to be here.
Right. And that document that we're talking about, the quarterly update document, has all this information in there. It also has some potential recommendations just listed. They don't need to be, they're not like our final findings. They're just potential recommendations. So if you all don't like that, we should change it.
That makes me nervous.
Yeah,
Because then they can get reported on in the press. Not that anybody's going to be paying attention, but why start with potential recommendations if we don't have them fully fleshed out and justified yet?
and if I can add, we also made a commitment as a task force that we wouldn't be crafting recommendations until we've had learning sessions and the community input, because this really should be driven beyond just our little task force. We should be listening to the community. So I had suggested to Valeria in an email that perhaps it should be, just just for continued exploration. I don't know. I just like, or is there some way we can say, you know, follow up on these or, you know, something like that?
Yeah, so I did do that, Emily, throughout the entire document. I changed anything that it had potential recommendations or consideration for recommendations. I changed it to this heading so that people knew that you all were still assessing, researching, exploring, determining, you know, what those recommendations could potentially be. So
That's good. Emily, I do want to just say though, that we can provide some initial recommendations in December when we do that final year kind of report, because I think there'll be some things that we can do that don't necessarily need community input. Like we define some like simple ways to have accessible documents on the police website that they can do right away. So I think we need to think about some of the recommendations that actually could be, for lack of a better word, low-hanging fruit, because then they'll be like, well, then you didn't provide us with any recommendations. And there were counselors that wanted like, what are things you can recommend right away without the whole community engagement aspect? And I think there might be some. We've already done some stuff at the city level in terms of policy changes that came from this group informally, right? From fines and fees. So I just think that there's stuff that's happening. There's things that can be recommendations, but obviously there's a bigger like phase to the community engagement that we want to make sure that we get. Does that make sense?
Can I comment on that? Thank you, Counselor. I totally agree. I think that what people should understand though is that if we had the contract from, you know, like if we had moved forward with the community engagement piece, we would have had recommendations in December. And so I just feel like that should be clear to the council that, you know, the reason that those recommendations, you know, we don't have a full slate of recommendations is because, I don't know, how long did it take to get that contract done? A year, almost. I think it was January, February, we started working on it. So I just want to flag that because that's, you know, to me, really frustrating that we haven't been able, like, because now we have to go back and ask to extend to the spring. And I don't know if all of us have signed up to be on for that long. And so I feel like we should be clear and transparent that that occurred, and that's why it's put us back. Because the community engagement input piece is so critical. And anyways, I just wanted to flag that.
Marcella, you have your hand up.
I don't blame you for not calling on me. It makes me nervous, Renee, Counselor Villarreal. I think what makes me nervous, like how can we talk about that without it being a part of our broader recommendations yet? And it is because of the community engagement piece, but even in our initial conversations on the first draft of the survey instrument with Dr. Gabriel Sanchez, you know, initially it was very policy heavy. And the first interaction we had with him is this survey instrument and the whole community engagement process really is about, as well as what we're trying to do through this committee, is thinking just bigger. And I know that it's been frustrating for some of the other counselors, and they want the low hanging fruit and they want the little tiny policy pieces that are easier to tackle. And I totally appreciate that. So how can we talk about that in a report without starting our first recommendations with things that are small and reform oriented and policy oriented, small policy, as opposed to, we really are tasked with walking with our community and reimagining and really thinking big and outside the box. And so that's my only concern. So I think we should do it. We should just find a way to help them not think small, because I think that's where everybody will want to go, as opposed to the bigness of what we really will be recommending.
Then that makes sense. I mean, that's fair. We just have to explain that in a way that makes sense for people. Was that your hand up, Monica? No.
No, it was just me agreeing with Marcela that I think that there's a risk in including low-hanging fruit recommendations too soon. While of course, and this is also to say that, you know, there's some of us on this group also, you know, work in policy outside of this group and are able to push things and get things through, but that's, you know, that's sort of a separate / group enterprise and not necessarily part of what we're trying to do here, which is bigger.
Gotcha.
I agree
Any other
completely as
opinions about
well.
that? Oh, sorry, Annie, go ahead.
I was just gonna add that I agree completely, because we may frame the low-hanging fruit within the context of the bigger fruit. So I think having it all kind of fleshed out, it's gonna make a lot more sense and be a lot more powerful. And I think not only did it take a year to get the contract, we still haven't heard an answer to all our questions, to really have meaningful responses.
Mhm.
And we're still waiting on that, so. I think that
Yeah.
the burden isn't on us with why it's taking so long, that we have to carry it.
Sounds good. Any other thoughts on that? Chris, do you have an opinion?
I think low hanging fruit's a bad term, I think, to kind of use, but what I was envisioning was, so Julie told us that the police department's in the process of redoing their website. So to make recommendations now to say, hey, it needs to be transparent, it needs to be something that the layperson can look at and find things easily. No one knows, very few people know what a hot sheet is, yet that's where you find the day-to-day calls. So to give PD that information now while they're building the website seems like an important thing to do instead of waiting till next June.
Monica?
Is there a way, and I love that, I mean, but that could also, and I don't know if this is something that the chairs that you all might be interested in, is that, you know, connecting, because these I guess they're informal recommendations at this point, but that you can connect the people that are redesigning the police website with the people at Vera, provide this documentation. So you're still facilitating that process, because I mean, and granted, we haven't done a full evaluation of Santa Fe Police Department, but looking at the APD, right? And looking at what those scores were just across the country, and doing that little exercise that we did during their presentation, I can presume that it will take much longer than just this little chunk of time of redesigning the website, right? Because we're talking about actually collecting data, making the data available, all these things. There are so many other things that they can do, but in the meantime, saying we had this presentation, you know, here's you know, the presenter's information, and starting to connect those dots. But I don't know how this is going to go about, and I don't know what their timeline is. Rather than it being like some sort of formal recommendation that we do in December, because then again, we run into some of, you know, potentially some roadblocks to some of the other wonderful work that we've done.
I guess we'll have to figure out what's the happy medium. There's some stuff for like potential recommendations or things to consider that we have for the policies and practices that they could do right away. And I'll be meeting with, I'll show you all in the working group about what I was thinking, because I haven't sent that update that we all worked on, because I wanted to make sure that it was in the presentation, and then it made sense. So we can go over that, and there's maybe potential things that we can add for them to do right away. And Vera actually relates to that, so be nice if they'd actually look at that presentation or that recording. So all right, so I think Valeria, you asked about, I think we need to resolve this now, because once we get into working groups, we're not going to come back into the meeting space again. So you asked about support for the presentation. And when I say support, I don't know if people need to be like reading the slides, or what were you all thinking, or just being present at the meeting on October 12th, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, having different voices always makes for a more dynamic presentation. Going back to your concern, Renee, that it's a very limited time that we have with the governing body. We want to be laser focused. So I lean into all of you, whatever you prefer. I'm 100% behind. Yeah. So it's really up to you. What do you all think? And we're talking about literally 1, 2, 3, 4 slides. The one that sort of touches on overview, the updates, and then what's next. And then the Q&A is the 4th slide. But
And the last couple ones, I think Renee and I and Val and I think Julie had kind of taken them. I think if anyone else is willing, I'm sure the council would love to hear from other members of the committee if you can make it. It should be pretty close to 5 o'clock when we start, and it's only 5 slides, should only take maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes. So it's not a lot of time. And
I'm
sure
falling for those estimates before, Counselor.
That's when you were part of the city. You're not part of
For tonight's working group agendas, I'm not, at least for ours, policies and practices, I'm not sure what we've got for the hour, but I'm wondering if we couldn't just bullet point, spend part of that bullet pointing what's in there. We can pull up the document and just send you maybe 5 bullet points that are very concise. If you've got 4 pages, I
Yeah.
can see either one slide is going to have 4 quadrants with bullet points of each working group, or you're going to have 2 slides half and half. So there's not a lot of room for much more than maybe 3 or 4 5-word bullet points. We could do a little bit of that now.
yeah. So Gino, since you're touching on that, I send you the link so that when we're in the breakout sessions, you can view that slide deck independently and start to jot down how it is that you want it to be bullet pointed, and just copy and paste it and send it to me via email or in the chat as well. But
I see
and
it
then,
in
of
the
course,
in the chat. I've clicked on it.
yeah, and then to the alternative. I'm so sorry. The alternative approaches team, I can do the same. Whoever wants, I can give Emily or Chris or somebody access to that. So you can take.
We can go through that, but I also want to go through what we're going to be sending staff, and I already have it prepared for you all to look at in our working group. So, but it's relevant, it's connected, so we can figure it out. I mean, it doesn't have to be 4. We can add more info if we need to. It's just that from 20, we needed it to be succinct. So
yeah,
you can all talk about that if you want in your working group. But I think it's just, we want to know if you want to be there to say anything or to cover any information on the slide or be able to answer questions. There was a question that had to do with something that some of Emily's information that was presented, and we couldn't answer the question. Not that you needed to be there per se, but we couldn't answer the question. Do you all remember that? I don't even remember what it was. It was just kind of just inquiry about something that was on the slide deck or information. So is there, I guess the question is like, do people, and you can be on Zoom if you want. You don't have to be there in person.
I'll do my best to be there in person.
I'm sorry. I could probably be there if they wanted to ask questions about the community engagement process. They're going to want to be like, how do we get to determine what's on the survey instrument? And we're going to be like, you can't. Oh, no. But I can be there just in case they want to know about what we're doing on the survey and community engagement piece.
That would be good. Any other thoughts, or people? Maybe just tell us if you are available to be there, and then we can kind of plan accordingly. If you can make it on October 12th at 5.
Beautiful.
So if you could let Valeria know by tomorrow, if you're going to be able to make it, so we can plan ahead and we can look out for you and know that you're going to be there and send you the Zoom link, etc.
I plan on attending in person.
Gina.
I might just go in person to see you, Gino, after all of these years.
Okay. Alrighty. Anything else?
I'm
I'm
complete.
not sure I want to see Gino because he used to beat up on me when we were at St. Mike's.
I don't know
In high
about
school?
that, Sugar Bear. That was his high school nickname. Everybody called him Sugar Bear.
Oh, that's good to know.
That is so sweet.
With too much information, Gino.
He really is.
Oh.
All right. Anything else on Lydia? Anything else? Questions? Are we ready to move into our presentation? Is that a yes?
Yes.
We're ready? Okay.
I'm wondering if Monica will come back with us. We had talked to Val, going back and forth, that this wasn't like a formal presentation. It would just give like an overview. We don't have a panel. This was an issue that has come up in the context of our work, and this issue being traffic enforcement and alternative models. And so I had sent out to everyone earlier before the meeting 2 documents. One is a spreadsheet, and the other are more specific notes on other jurisdictions that have moved forward with something alternative enforcement like models. This work was done by an intern at Drug Policy Alliance, and so I just want to note that she did this work over the summer, and so some of this information may have changed or is updated, so I just want to also flag that. But just in general, the importance of thinking for our group in our work to reimagine that many of the unhealthy relationships, sometimes encounters that we've seen across the country have occurred, that have started with a traffic stop because someone had outdated registration or a broken windshield. If we all recall Dante Wright in Minnesota, he was stopped with because of I think it was an expired tag on his car, and also had an air freshener hanging from the window, the rear view mirror, and that turned deadly, and he lost his life. The officer thought she was pulling a stun gun and actually pulled a weapon and murdered Dante Wright. And so I would just point to one of the case studies from Center City, Minneapolis, where this incident occurred. And they have actually moved forward with really amazing sort of new ways of thinking about traffic, as have Philadelphia. Those may be two that, as we start thinking about what that might look like in Santa Fe, or and talking to our community members about what that looks like. I think those two jurisdictions offer some lessons to be learned. In Center City, I've actually had conversations with their mayor. They're going even beyond some of this traffic enforcement. They're also looking at banning no-knock and quick knock raids, which is something actually Santa Fe has already done. The no-knock piece, not the quick knock, but the no-knock. And so it's also a smaller, it's a suburban, it's like a suburb of Minneapolis, but when we think about size, there might be some comparisons to our community. But again, what Center City is doing is looking at banning the stops by armed cops of things like broken windshields or non-moving violations, right? And creating a different type of response that is not done by police, things that wouldn't necessarily lead to serious public safety issues. So we're not going to walk through all of these different jurisdictions, but I just urge you to take a look at the information that was gathered. There are a couple of places where they've actually done some evaluation of the impact. It's mostly around looking at disparate arrests. So again, a lot of the data shows that when people are stopped for these non-moving violations, they're more often people of color and overrepresented what these communities are in the current population. So for example, I think it was Virginia went back and actually looked at what had occurred after they had implemented this alternative model, and they saw disparities decline in who was being stopped and subsequently arrested. I'd also just flag that in the spreadsheet that we sent out, there are different ways that these models are being implemented or being approved. So there are statewide legislation being introduced and approved. There are models that are being really directed by the prosecutors and the district attorneys in various places. So that's more of a decline to prosecute model, where if they get evidence or a case from a stop that was a non-moving violation, they just won't proceed with prosecuting. Then there are obviously city council level models. So that, again, just there's a column there that we may want to look at what is more appropriate when we're looking at a city task force. And then there was one more category where it was the police chief that actually put in place policies and procedures just on their own. So it was a directive that came directly from the chief. And obviously that doesn't last beyond the chief. And in some places, I think a new chief came in and it was actually overturned. But those are different ways that different jurisdictions are exploring. So I hope it'll be helpful for us to just dive in and take a look. I think the notes are really interested. The notes document is the most helpful. I would also stress, and maybe I'll turn it over to Monica to add anything, but maybe we can spend a few minutes talking about how do we address this in our community input? The survey or the tool we're going to be using? Is there a question that we may want to be asking the public as it relates to traffic? So, Monica, do you have stuff to
Yeah,
add?
yeah, thank you, Emily. I just wanted to ask too, and make sure everybody is sort of clear or knows what a pretextual stop is, because I think sometimes that phrasing can be a little different, and it's actually a legal term, right? There's case law that determines how you prove that a stop was pretextual. There's also other types of ways that we look at pretextual stops, but I just want to make sure that everybody knows what we're dealing with. So I'm just going to say it rather than calling people out. But a pretextual stop means that, you know, so for example, some of these policies are identifying particular types of traffic infractions that they are no longer going to use as a primary reason to prosecute somebody. And the idea being that that some police officers, when they're out, you know, patrolling, they see that somebody has a cracked windshield, and that is, you know, a violation of the law, so they pull them over. But a pretextual stop would mean that they would pull them over because they're actually looking for evidence of other crimes. They're not really interested in the traffic violation. They're much more interested in other things. So what they want to do is expand the scope of the search to either look in the person's body or to look in the vehicle for contraband, you know, things like potentially drugs, potentially guns, potentially all kinds of things. But what frequently happens is that in these interactions, they can become violent, as Emily said, and it's actually really, it can be dangerous for the law enforcement officer. It's certainly dangerous for the person that's getting pulled over. So a pretextual stop is that, right, it's pretext. I said that I was pulling you over because you had a broken taillight and I'm concerned about public safety, but what I really want to do is look for other things. And all of these policies, all of these communities are engaging in this because they're trying to get away from pretextual stops and also free up law enforcement time, because a lot of time is sucked up by these types of stops. And there's been some studies that can correlate, right? The amount of pretextual stops actually reduces the amount of, say, violent crime that gets solved because officers are focused on different things. So I think it's really interesting. A couple of things that are unique to New Mexico, and this is a statewide thing, is that we're one of 13 states that criminalizes traffic. All of those other states, traffic infractions are not dealt with in the criminal context. They're all civil infractions. But yet, even though it's a civil infraction, law enforcement can, you know, in some of these places will still use it as an entryway to expand the scope of the search. Here, though, it's dealt with as criminal. What that means is that if you do get a traffic infraction, the court can also issue bench warrants for your arrest. So there's some sort of unique things to our community. There's also different things that the city can do versus what you can do statewide. So I think it's interesting to keep all of those things in mind as we look at this research. And just to highlight, because I know that some of these things have been hot buttons here, but it's interesting to see them be sort of reduced in other communities, are things like a big one is the modified muffler. I see this sort of coming up over and over again in this document, so that there's a lot of communities across the country that believe that this has nothing to do with community safety, and that they would like to make it a lower or lowest priority. Other things that I used to see a lot as a public defender are things like your license plate light. So not even a tail light, it's the light that illuminates your license plate. So if that's out, people getting pulled over for that. That was a frequent one. So there's all of these interesting things that are listed here that are common to our community, but also common to these other places. So I really encourage everybody to take a look at the research. I think it's really wonderful and pretty comprehensive.
And thanks, Monica. I'd also just note that if we want to see if any of these jurisdictions can come to speak, we could try to, reach out to have, more of an expert panel than I am, because I'm definitely not any expert in this. We just, follow, as in my work from Drug Policy Alliances, Monica mentioned that the pretextual stops are often to look for contraband and for illicit substances that then lead to more engagement in the criminal legal system and potentially more harm. So that's our quick, brief, informal update on traffic violations and ideas to start thinking about reimagining how we do it in Santa Fe.
Well, thank you, Emily and Monica. I believe Marcela has a question.
I do. Can either of you or both of you speak to how this relates to people's experiences of in our community and perception of racial profiling, bias-based policing? Because anytime, when we pass the bias-based policing ban, of course, people will always say, they'll describe an experience they have, and then the police 9 times out of 10 said, no, well, you didn't get stopped because you were Black or brown, you got stopped because of your tail light, And so it's all of the, I really appreciate all the practical things that you talked about when it comes to resources and all of that, but then also just that sense of community and that sense of being over policed that's also important in this. Can you speak to how that all interplays with this?
Happy to talk about it a little bit, and I don't know if I'll be answering your question, and then Emily, please jump in. And this is based on my experience as a public defender. What I found is that a lot of stops, sometimes I would call them almost they're equipment related, so they're poverty stops. Sometimes law enforcement will be looking for certain cars that look a particular way, and those would be the cars that they would target. Right? If you're driving a 2021 vehicle, a nice truck, maybe you wouldn't get stopped, right? And it's also a little bit harder to stop you. I mean, now sort of the law is a little bit interesting, depending on if you're weaving in the lane, inside the lane, you don't even leave the lane. But a lot of stuff around, the cracked windshield specifically, or an obstructed view. An obstructed view is a really interesting one that, like having an air freshener, or having, I grew up a particular way. Sometimes people would hang like a Santo or something over the rear view mirror. That's part of my culture, right? Part of the culture that a lot of us share here. That could be seen as an obstruction of view. So there's different ways, there's different indicators that unfortunately, that you can hide behind, where really maybe it is racial profiling or another type of class profiling, but there's ways to get around it, right? So obstructed view, even though, right, there's like a cultural experience. I think other things like can be disguised, right? Like there are certain types of things. Like I potentially would even say things like tinted windows and excessively loud mufflers. These are things, especially when you come from a community in which you have a car culture. I grew up in the 90s when there used to be a cruise line, which I loved very much, right? And what started to happen is that started to get broken up, right? And as a young person, I loved it. One of the ways it was broken up is through tinted window things, nuisance laws. And I think that there can be a resurgence of that, and it's sort of code for looking at particular communities of people and policing them in a particular way. And it can be encouraged by other community members. So I would say these are sort of code for other things. A lot of it does have to do with income, things like an expired registration, and registration can be expensive. Inspections in some places, we don't have that there, but in other places, right? These are all things you have to pay for. Same thing with equipment violations. You have to pay to get those things fixed. So it's interesting in which this is actually a really tangible way in which certain communities are policed and others are not, based on information, based on cultural stuff, a perceived fear of young people and youth, and particularly youth of color, and here, and also income levels. And I mean, I'm happy to go into that more and tell more stories, because I was a public defender for a lot of years and saw a lot of things. And also I grew up in this community, so I remember what it was like when I was younger too.
I don't have anything to add. I think Monica, unless Marcella, that didn't answer your question, but absolutely. And I was going to bring up the tinted windows and the mufflers, because I think, those are two things that we're dealing with right now. And so this is a timely conversation.
One thing too that I'd like to add about the mufflers, some of the loud mufflers originally, a huge purpose was for them to be on motorcycles, because the louder your muffler was, it was actually a safety concern, then more people could see you. So if more people could see you, then hopefully they wouldn't hit you, right? So that's why you would see Harleys and some other louder, other types of bikes that would have these really large, sort of louder modified mufflers. Like I said, growing up for me, it was all about the lowrider. Now it's a little bit different, it's other things, but it's interesting to me that it's still being, or people are still attempting to police it in the same way.
This is just a little follow-up. I wonder if there's a way that we can structure for our working group, just questions of youth in our survey or in the focus groups about people's experience with these kinds of laws, how they perceive them, how they are experiencing them in their community, with all of those, to really get the richness of some of the details that you just shared with us. Because it seems like these kinds of alternative approaches are good on so many levels, resource-wise, practical, for legal reasons, but also to just help people or to really get to this, how people are feeling about this disparate enforcement of these laws. So thank you for sharing this, both of you.
Okay.
I have a question. So as you know, this is a policy change is being requested or being proposed by one of the counselors. So the muffler nuisance ordinance has been on our books since the 80s. And since COVID, things have really amped up with, people, because there's less people on the street. There's a lot of drag racing happening, and people who I'm not sure who they are, but because no one's really out as much now, maybe not now, but when COVID hit. So there's a lot more issues with drag racing and modified mufflers, and mostly actually all over the city. It's not just downtown where that was the first complaint we got about tourists complaining because kids and young people were drag racing and driving through the downtown area at all hours of the night. And now it's actually just expanded through the whole city. So all of us counselors have gotten numerous complaints about this. Do something. I mean, I don't know if you all sleep with your windows open, but it is crazy. I mean, it's very disruptive. And actually there's a point where there's some folks from that sit on the mayor's commission on disability saying that this is actually now becoming a traumatic response for people with PTSD that cannot handle the loud noises because it's pretty excessive at this point. So one of the counselors is proposing this. So right now with the muffler, a citation for a loud muffler that's modified is $25. And the increase will be going up to $250 between 250 and 500, depending on the issue. And then it also will add restrictions to businesses that modify, that they will no longer be able to modify mufflers on cars. So there's a lot of people in support of this, and we haven't heard anyone that's against it. So my question to you is that a stance that in each of your kind of respective roles that you would want to express that from your organization's point of view or anyone else's like individual perspective? Because I'm kind of in a, like, I don't know how Chris feels, but it's a hard situation. We've, you know, in my opinion, increasing the amount doesn't necessarily mean there'll be more stops. Because what we haven't seen yet is the data that shows how many stops have actually occurred because of this increase of noise. And I don't think that the numbers have increased even during COVID in terms of stops. We just don't have enough cops to be able to do that. And they haven't been stopping. There was a moment where they actually did kind of an operation and there were some stops that happened last year, just like a month period of time. But for the most part, this is not a priority for our police. And so, yeah, this is, I don't know. I guess was wanting to know if there was any kind of perspectives on it and if you all feel strongly about it, because it's going to be going through committee. And if there's like an alternative to providing support for people that we're looking into, maybe having an amendment that would actually have a, there'd be a, like a pot of money that would be able to support people to actually help them change their car back to its initial model, or I don't know how you would describe that, because some of these cars actually they're not modified, they're just, that's how they're manufactured. And then if you look at Harleys, they're manufactured that way. Lowriders, you know, make a certain noise too. And so I guess it's just kind of subjective to me, like how would one decide it's excessive? And that's kind of my question, I guess, as we move this along, but I don't know if anyone has any like suggestions or how we, because it's I don't know. It goes against everything that we've been talking about here, this change.
I think the big question is public safety. And what is public safety? What keeps us safe? I'm not sure if a loud noise and the policing of a loud noise, I certainly don't feel like that keeps me safe. To me, it sounds like that you're criminal. We can't criminalize all different kinds of behavior. I mean, I guess we can criminalize all sorts of things. Because I know, for example, Santa Fe is a place where people love their dogs. You just saw my dog, right? My dog barks, right? She doesn't bark all the time, but she barks. A lot of dogs bark. It's interesting to me that people want to focus on a particular noise and not others. I also sleep with my windows open. I live over by Santa Fe High. In fact, I live by the park that a lot of people have a hard time with because there's a lot of people living in that park. The park, but I don't feel bothered necessarily. Granted, that's me. There's other people. You know, I have a pretty big family. Most of them live here. I would say people should be more concerned about housing and other issues than if a vehicle makes a loud noise. And to be fair, like to your point, this ordinance has been on the books since the 80s. People have had loud mufflers, like, for example, right, the vehicles that they're just made that way. To say that those are now illegal because, you know, people want a particular, well, you can hear my dog barking right now. Maybe you can. I can hear her.
I'm going to call the police on you, Monica.
Well, this is the thing is I could have a neighbor that wants to do that, right? You know, and I guess
there is a dog barking ordinance, by the way.
Oh, I know there is, because I've had to defend people with some interesting things with that. But the thing is that at the end of the day, I mean, also you could live in a city or a larger community where things are kind of noisy. I lived in a larger city where there was jackhammering going on for the entire time I was in law school in San Francisco, right across the street. I mean, I think it's an interesting thing to waste our public safety resources on things like a loud noise. But some may think that other things, that is important, and that's interesting, but you know, that's me. And I think it's a really easy way to criminalize particular groups of people and to create a pipeline that really, I don't think serves anybody. Also, one last thing about the fine. They're going to have to stay within the constitutional limitations. We have it literally, the federal and state constitution has an excessive fines clause. There's case law up and down about what the parameters of that are. So they would have to stay within the confines of that if they want to raise the fine, which they certainly could do. It just can't go outside of, number one, what a municipal court is allowed to do, which is limited. They're a court of very limited jurisdiction. It's a petty misdemeanor, I believe. And also petty misdemeanor in the city code is defined even slightly reduced because they're trying to avoid the idea of having a jury trial, because you can't have a jury trial necessarily at the city. So there's lots of different things that could limit what some people are upset about.
Monica, say that again. They have to stay within the confines of what?
So both the federal state constitution, there's an excessive fines clause, constitutional law. Within that, so you have different, right? There's a traffic citation, traffic misdemeanors, and then petty misdemeanors. And then it goes up, but municipal court doesn't have jurisdiction over bigger things. So because the jurisdiction of municipal court is what it is, they can't go outside of that sentencing structure. So they'll have to stay within the sentencing structure. I'd have to look exactly of what it is to see what structure they have to stay within, but that's going to limit how high the fine can go as well. There's so many things that will limit how high the fine can be.
Thank you.
And thank you all. Thank you, Monica. We have Marcela who has a question, or her hand is up.
Yeah, thank you, Monica, for helping us through this. I really appreciate your feedback. I just want to say that this is why I think having a really strong, robust community engagement process on this task force is so important. And we're about to go into it. We have a good timeline for when that's the first initial survey instrument and the focus groups. But I want to remind the task force that's not on our committee, on our working group, that this really is, this process for us, we are really committed to making this process available, really not even just available to, driven by community members who aren't always heard, who aren't the ones that are emailing you with their complaints that are valid for, that are really, but I mean, valid complaints for community, right? But that really don't have often the same avenues that the rest of us have to let our feelings, our experiences with law enforcement, with a lot of these, these laws that will either fine us or criminalize us. And so that's really what we are meant to get at. So, we're going to provide to the whole task force our first draft instrument for the 18th. So please be aware of that. And this is what we're trying to get at, is how are all of the different ways that we interact with our government in this way. And I think that this will help create a roadmap for all of these little decisions. I hope that this task force can help provide a roadmap for all of these little decisions that get made in the future, to really measure them against the people who live and work and who are often bearing the brunt of over criminalization and over policing. So anyway, I just wanted to add that. Please be a part of this process, the community engagement process, as we proceed with UNM, because this is precisely what this is meant to do.
Thank you, Marcela. How are we feeling, Monica and Emily? Any additional key points or? No, we're feeling good. I see your eyes, Monica.
I'll say one last thing, which is mentioned very briefly in the notes, is that for some people too, and I just want to have a cautionary tale, which is, I feel like Brother Joe, does anybody, who went to St. Mike's? Am I the only one that, okay, yeah. Oh yeah, we went to St. Mike's, but you guys didn't have Brother Joe. Did you?
Yeah,
Oh, you
He-
did.
he was very young, and I'll tell you where he is now, but go ahead, which is a good thing.
Where is he?
He is the most senior brother for the Santa Fe, for the New Orleans, San Francisco district, and he's their liaison to the Vatican.
Okay, I just want everybody to know that Brother Joe is one of the most wonderful people that anybody could ever know. And I think about him a lot when I speak, because sorry that I'm going off on a tangent. Anyways, he had a felt board and he would say things like, lo and behold. And then he would say, tell us some story, right? And so I just thought about him as I was talking. And I love so much, that you know where he is. Wonderful, beautiful human being. I digress. However, it's touched on in here. One of the things that people will move to as an alternative to police engaging in traffic is the idea of speed and red light cameras. And I want to just tell a quick little cautionary tale about them, which is in a perfect world, these potentially could be useful. Unfortunately, they've proven to be pretty difficult to implement in an equitable way. And I'll give one example, because I know we don't have a lot of time, which is there's usually, I believe there's 4 or 5 companies nationally that actually have these cameras, and that a city or a jurisdiction has to contract with. And all of these companies will actually they contract for certain things, because what they're trying to do is cast a very wide net. And one of those net widening things is that they will actually put in the contract that the only way that they'll go into a particular community is if a community reduces the yellow light time, because they want to make it easier to catch more people that are running red lights. And this is because it is a revenue generator. They'll also create quotas for how many tickets have to occur in order for them to stay in that particular community. And rather than it being an alternative policing, because police will still go out and still do patrol, still engage in pretextual stops, and also just engage in regular traffic enforcement, you'll also have this entire other subset of technology that is that really isn't curbing behavior. There's a variety of other things that you can do to modify driving behavior to make communities safe. These are things that include putting trees in medians or other types of foliage, increasing bike lanes across the city, even having those blinking signs that tell you how fast you're going and that you need to slow down. These are things that have been proven to actually reduce behavior, whereas some of these other the cameras don't have the same track record. I could talk about this a lot more, but I know we're limited on time, but I just want to throw that out there, that it's a really interesting area for research, and Santa Fe's been pretty successful at stopping this from happening, because there's all sorts of privacy concerns as well. But these are things that are more and more being pushed, but it's important to be critical about the process, and also where they're put, because unfortunately in some places they were put in particular communities and not others. So there's so many different concerns with these cameras. So I don't necessarily want to encourage people to say, well, why don't we do that? Because then there's no bias and there's no person with a weapon. But there's other ways that this can track people in an interesting and very sad cycle. And with that, I will stop talking.
Thank you for that additional context. Monica is incredibly helpful. Very, very helpful. Okay, quick time check, 2 minutes to the top of the hour, 7 p.m. If there aren't any additional comments or questions, Would you all like to break out into your working groups? And then I will be joining you all to, make sure I'm in the loop of your progress and work. How does that sound? Great. Julie, let me see, maybe I can do it.
Hey, Bruce. You hear me?
Yes,
So the committee or the task force members just went into their breakout rooms. Do you know
Okay.
which group you're a part of?
I'm with Valeria, the councilwoman from District 1, Renee.
Oh, you're with Renee. Okay, I'll go
Yes.
ahead and send you to that room.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll explain, but I changed my router today and it was a little more difficult than I thought it would be. I just got internet connection.
Oh no. Okay, well, I'll send you to the room. I think they're gonna just be in the breakout groups until 7:30, and then we'll
Okay.
go ahead and come
Okay,
back together.
I really did have something to add, so
Okay.
I'm glad I got the connection on. So here we go.
Yeah. All right, I'll send you there now.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
I think everyone left.
Yeah.
Just about.
Thanks for joining us, Bruce.
Okay,
I hope your recovery goes well.
good. I'll send out an email with what I'm gonna be doing. So, there you go.
Okay, what does that mean?
I'm gonna try to get into a training class at the academy for
Oh,
the
uh-oh, you're on mute now. Bruce, you put yourself on mute. Hey, can we stop the recording?